The Empire of Denver, Imperial Conquests, Volume 6, Section 23. The following is a treatise written by Grand Sage Denethel, Chief Imperial Historian, regarding the conquest of Hadrofax. The original document was written in the year 427, under the reign of Emperor Gedelen.
This document has been amended by historian Ormir in the year 435. This has been part of an ongoing effort by Emperor Gedelen II to remove bias from the imperial archives. This edict is an attempt to make these historical documents more useful for future generations. The original text has been left unaltered, and all notations have been clearly marked.
Well, so much for Gedelen II. The historical archives are once again being amended. These notations are written by scribe Ardelens in the year 446. In the aftermath of the Godfall Wars, Denvar has thought it best to take another look through the archives.
The Denvari conquest in Hadrofax was one of the bloodiest wars to date within Imperial history. It ended with the dissolution of the Fifth Army.
This claim is inaccurate. I will address it later.
And with the Third and Seventh Armies bloodied. Due to the tenacity of Imperial soldiers, it still ended with Hadrofax being brought into the Imperial fold.
As it is clear today, it was not due to tenacity, but more due to divine luck and circumstance. I won't deny its importance, though.
Hadrofax was one of the 4 Crixil kingdoms west of the Reaching Sea. Legends tell that the crabfolk crawled from the ocean in the century following the God-Eater Wars. The Crixil spread westward around the time of the War of Shadow.
This is one of the few times that Denethel properly says that what he's referencing is legend. Enjoy it while it lasts.
This is also one of Denethel's most succinct introductions. You're normally safe skipping the first page or so in any of his work. He certainly did not help the rumor at the time that imperial historians were paid by the word.
The Fifth Army, led at the time by General Hedlin, marched to Hadrofax in the waning winter of the year 422. They entered the country through the Faradin Ford, meant to be an expeditionary force. The Fifth's goal was primarily to ascertain the strength of the Crixil forces and begin preliminary campaigning. The Crixil did not contest the crossing. The Empire was expecting a docile population to overthrow. What they encountered instead was fierce resistance by the local populace. The Crixil heavy infantry proved to be a nearly insurmountable obstacle to the Fifth. It was thanks to the cunning of Captain Ostra of the Second Company that they were able to overcome.
Ostra, who remains in imperial service at time of writing, regularly cites Sergeant Oker as having been key in his decision-making process.
This should be obvious to anyone reading today.
During the early weeks of the campaign, the main crossing into Hadrofax from Imperial territory, Pinecliff Crossing, was destroyed by local irregular forces. Due to the spring thaw, the Faradin Ford also became uncrossable. This left the Fifth isolated. The Third Army waited on the banks of the Caladar River for the search to end.
Denethel is being very generous to the Empire here. There were plenty of ways for the Imperial forces to cross into Hadrofax, but they made the decision to leave the Fifth alone. They were overconfident, which is a running theme in Imperial campaigns under Gedelen I. The slaughters that would happen later can be accurately attributed to malpractice and ignorance from the military's high command.
The Fifth Army waged an effective campaign against the Crixil forces. Through wit and perseverance, General Hedlin managed to push all the way to the fields outside of Hadrofax's capital.
It is obvious to anyone with even a passing familiarity with military tactics that the Crixil were slowly bleeding the Fifth in anticipation of one major battle.
It was on these fields that the Fifth would be dealt their greatest defeat.
I would say so far, but I actually think this observation stands to this day.
The Battle of Kedrolock Field remains one of the bloodiest days in military history.
This, however, is a good so far.
The Fifth locked swords with the Crixil for nearly an entire day. Losses were staggering on both sides. By the end, nearly 4/5 of the army had been killed or wounded.
This approximation may even be a little kind.
It was said that the Paragon of War walked the fields that day, driving everyone to fight beyond what they would normally be capable of.
Once again, this is more embellishment from Denethel. I will be kind and assume that it is meant to be poetic, but there is not evidence that the Paragon of War exists, let alone was present for the Battle of Kedrolock Field.
We know he was there now. The Paragon of War, who we now know to be named Kaiadros, worked very closely with Imperial military during the Godfall Wars, even back at Desserin. He confirmed to us that he was indeed at the Battle of Kedgerlock Field, which does explain a lot. From what he and other accounts at the time said, he was what drove the Crixel to fight harder and smarter than expected.
In the end, the Crixil lines broke first. Imperial might won the day.
Imperial might had nothing to do with victory that day. The Paragon decided to leave the battle partway through, which caused the Crixel's fighting spirit to vanish. If he had stayed, the Fifth likely would have been decimated. In all our questioning, he has still proven reluctant to answer why he abandoned the Crixel, and no one's willing to push the matter.
The Third Army had crossed the Caladar and would be able to reinforce in the coming week. Hadrofax had been sent on their way to defeat. Hadrofax would be in Imperial control by the end of the year.
As is standard with Denethel, he completely glosses over the pacification efforts by the garrisoning armies at the time. The 7th would be left to pacify Hadrofax under the purview of Regional Governor Andriel. Remaining loyalists in the region waged a particularly effective guerrilla campaign lasting until the year 430.
However, this would be the last war waged by the Fifth Army. It would be completely disbanded, its survivors sent home to retirement in glory.
This is a blatant lie. The majority of the 5th is still in service as they don't give stipends to survivors.
Ormir doesn't expound on this, as I'm sure he doesn't find it important enough, but the survivors were consolidated into a single company. Everyone reading this now should already be very familiar with Fifth Company, lovingly nicknamed Sorry Company. In fact, I'm almost certain the only reason anyone is reading this document is to track the history of Sorry Company.
The Denevari Empire would continue to grow its borders thanks to the bravery of soldiers like those in the Fifth. Though it may have been their last battle, their legacy and legend lives on to this day.